Fort Sedgwick was one of them, and Fort McPherson was the other one. And what had happened in that is General Joseph Wheeler with the Confederate Army is making his way down into Bradley County into Cleveland. When they get into what is now downtown Cleveland, they get cannon fire. And they realize there are two forts off in the distance. Well, what happens is Joseph Wheeler, he sends one of his men with a letter, and what this letter says is, do you intend on letting me shell the town? The colonel who gets this, his name is Horatio Gibson, and Gibson says, be my guest. Now, in the time that this letter is received, almost nearly all, well, I won't say nearly, all of what is now downtown Cleveland will evacuate the city. And from there, Cleveland, Tennessee will be burned to the ground. There are evidence of this being here. If you look at First Presbyterian Church, if you look hard enough at the steeples, you can see where there's bullet holes. And I'm surprised there's honestly not any cannons still stuck in the walls. But
what year would that have been?
That would have been 1863. Because for a very long time, Cleveland had been controlled by the Confederacy. But in 1863, that will change when Union soldiers come up through here and they push them out.
When Grant burned everything down? Was it Grant?
No, it wasn't General Grant. It was what's his name?
Sherman.
General Sherman. His famous March to the Sea.
Yeah.
I mean, he did come through here as well. Actually, the Joyous Rot House, that was actually the base of communications for the Union. Oh,
how much did they burn?
All of it. Everything that they came across, any building, like any person that they saw, they tore it apart. They figured, if they couldn't stop the Confederacy by means of, by battle, what if they just go and, destroy and hurt, the South economically? And I think that's the best reason that I believe why they burned everything. But, anyway, there was something else. Oh, yeah. But anyway, at the Joyous Rot House, where that was the command post of the Union Army, there was as many as 20,000 Union soldiers surrounding and camping out around that house. Mm. So just think...
That's a lot of people.
Yep. I mean, it is an absurd number of soldiers. But anyway, as I say, I mean, Cleveland has so much Civil War history to it, it's not even funny. And, we also even have, the Trail of Tears, if you think about it, I mean, the Trail of Tears started here. I mean, it's like, there's just, when people say there's nothing to do here in Cleveland and Bradley County, it aggravates me, because look what I'm doing. I mean, most of my videos in the beginning, were all centered around here in Cleveland and Bradley County, and look at my channel.
You got a lot of subscribers and a lot of views.
Yep.
Recently, you had one on the Egyptian, possible Egyptian temple.
Yep.
And it got 213,000 views and counting.
Yep.
Why is that so significant, you think? Why is it so interesting to people?
I think the reason why it is so significant is because it makes us question, does the United States have some kind of hidden history behind it? Is there something there that, predates human recordings? Which there is. I mean, for at least what we have so far. You've got the Hopewell Indians, you've got the Mississippians, or at least that's what anthropologists call them. If you look at Cherokee documents, Cherokee accounts, one of them was Cherokee Chief Charles Harris back in 1826. They talked about these mysterious groups or tribes of people from the Cherokee, one of them being, the Ani-kutani. The Ani-kutani were a Cherokee priesthood that ruled over the Cherokee for about 2,000 years. And they were actually overthrown by the Cherokee in about 300 years before European settlers arrived into the country. What this Cherokee priesthood was, or the Ani-kutani, is they were just a mysterious group of people. They only came out at night. They would say, like, I am from above. They were just a very mysterious group of people. And even if you look at, and there's another Cherokee group of people that are known as the Moon-Eyed people, another mysterious tribe of people that I think probably somewhere exists, or at least, paleontologists, anthropologists, say something different, but, it makes you wonder, what, like that brings the question, were Egyptians in, North America at the time?
Do you think one of these, what'd you call the first one? The
Ani-kutani.
Do you think they could have possibly been Egyptians?
Possibly.
I mean, when did you say they ruled over the Cherokee?
We're about 2,000 years before European settlement. And
Which would have been what?
That would have been, let me see, first people arrive in America 1565.
In theory.
In theory.
No, we're talking about Columbus then, right? 1565?
Oh, 1565 is when, actually no, 1509 is when, that's when, St. Augustine, Florida is declared in the name of the Spanish Empire, but I wouldn't really consider that, because that's Florida. But, I guess I'd probably look at, well, anyway, so around 1500s before any European settlers.
So you're saying 2,000 years before that?
Yep.
The Ani-kutani ruled the Cherokee.
Yep.
For 300 years or so.
Yep. And
so that would have been before, that'd been AD or BC, right?
Yep. That would have been BC.
And how did they arrive here? I guess that's the mystery, right?
Yep. That is the grand mystery. Who were these people? Some.
Was there any description of what they looked like?
From what I understand, they were kind of. I think they had. I think the Ani-kutani. I know I saw it somewhere. They just had a different pigment about themselves.
Darker or lighter or redder? Or?
I'd probably say darker. But what was I saying there?
Would they have now? Some of the old Indians' writings describe men on longboats. Could that have been the Egyptians?
Possibly. I mean, that's another interesting thing. It's like historians say, the Egyptians could have never done it, but you're talking about the same people who built the pyramids that to this day nobody knows how they did it. So I do believe that, Egyptians did come over to the United States, and it is plausible.
And so why would they have set out to sail here, reckon?
That is the question. I mean, the only thing I can think of is since ancient Egypt was an empire, they did it to colonize and, grow their, what would you call it? Not their empire, but grow their stretch, I suppose, on their country. And that's the only thing I could really think of.
Now, in the Bible, the Egyptians were they from Ham, like Moses had a son named Ham, Shem, and Japheth? Wasn't the Egyptians the descendants of Ham, I believe?
I believe so.
So and then Joseph in the Bible, he was actually, there's some say that he was actually here. Have you heard that?
I've heard a very little bit of it. I mean, I'm not too familiar. I mean, I've heard about it, but I've never done a full research on it.
Do you think that now this temple? Did you see any? This was in Norris, Tennessee.
Yep, it was. It's like right in the heart of where Norris Dam State Park is now.
Wonder why it's a state park.
I do know that Norris Dam State Park does have a lot of Appalachian history, but it also has a lot of Native American history as well. And I think that's where kind of some of its history plays in, because in 1934, when that dam was being constructed, the United States government, they go and they do a a survey of the area. And when they were surveying the river, they found this mysterious, I guess you would say, they found a mysterious temple. They kept on digging, and it got deeper and deeper and deeper until it was 100 by 100 foot foundation with a very mysterious building in the center of it.
Did they ever take any pictures of that?
There are photos that exist of it.
Now, would a temple be different than a pyramid?
It would. A pyramid is a kind of a burial kind of figure, or a burial building. You know, they would use it for pharaohs or people that were high in stature within the Egyptian empire. But where are my words? But
The difference between a temple and a pyramid.
A temple is a place of worship. Essentially, it's kind of it's a place of worship. It's where, place of worship, rituals would take place, marriages, ceremonies, even funerals. That's kind of what a temple is.
Would this temple, why would they just, if they found this major archaeological site, why would they just flood it and make it part of the dam? It seems like they would have researched it further.
Honestly, the only thing that I can gather on that is Tennessee during 1934. It was the Great Depression. You know, it was a very, very poor area. You know, and in that area there was a lot of flood problems there. So the only thing I can gather at the time is they were just hurting for, money. You know, they were hurting, for jobs, to build their lives up. I mean, that's the only thing that I can really think of.
So maybe there just wasn't time to research, and maybe at the time they didn't know what it was, except just a building.
Yep.
Just an old building.
Yep.
What was it made of?
Stone. And some of the things that they even found inside of this building is they found about 19 bodies, or 19, it would be bodies, 19 bodies that were buried, or 19 graves. And in there they also found a box containing this type of purple paint. And this purple paint came from a type of mollusk that was not known in the United States.
What's a mollusk?
A mollusk is kind of like a mussel, for example. You know, go down to the river, you see like these mussels, mollusks, some people say they're good to eat, some people say they're nasty. They filter out the water. That's pretty much what a mussel is. But a mollusk, or that's pretty much what one is.
So in this box they found evidence of that purple mollusk or paint that was indigenous of Egypt at the time?
I mean, that's what I believed, but other people have also told me that it could even be known to New Mexico, or not New Mexico, to Mexico, but it's one of those things that it's like, where does it come from? That is the main question. But
how would they have, or what would have you're saying this would have happened, possibly this Anunnaki?
Ani-kutani.
Do you think that was possibly the same people, or was it or was the Egyptians the Ani-kutani?
The Ani-kutani. That's the one thing that. That's why I believe there is a correlation there. throughout different cultures and different societies, they have different names for things. I do believe the Ani-kutani were Egyptian immigrants, or people that, had immigrated to America.
On the boats when they came.
Yep.
Isn't it strange that it seems like wherever we hear about there being Native Americans, that we also have evidence of temples and things that look like they were from Egypt. Some say that America is the second Egypt.
Yep.
Was the second Egypt.
I mean, there's also examples of that as well. Look in Ohio. You have, I believe it's called Cairo, Ohio, or Cairo. Anyway, in that area, they also found these mysterious Egyptian, I'd probably say Egyptian artifacts, mounds, these foundations. Actually, we even, here in Bradley County in Cleveland, we have something similar as well. The Chautauqua, I gotta say it the way that people in Bradley County would, because they would call me a northerner if I said Chautauqua. Shady or Chatta. The Chatta Wall or the Shady Wall. And it was an artifact that was found in 1895 on Isaac Hooper's property. Again, it had these very mysterious etchings in it, these weird hieroglyphs. Some people said those could potentially be Paleo Hebrew. So, since Hebrews, were enslaved by Egyptians, thousands of years ago, before, Moses comes in and, tells Pharaoh to free his people, that also might line up with that as well, because...
Go over that part again.
Okay. Shady Wall, when it was found in 1895 by Isaac Hooper, some of them hypothesized that in this wall there were Paleo-Hebrew etchings in this wall.
And Paleo-Hebrew etchings, Paleo-Hebrew would have been, what's Paleo mean?
Just kind of like just archaeological, like really, really early Hebrew.
So, and the fact that the Hebrews were enslaved by the Egyptians. Yeah, that's a good point. So continue.
But anyway, that is also an interesting hypothesis, or something to hypothesize. But there are also very interesting artifacts that are in this area as well. In North Georgia, you have Track Rock Gap. There is also another set of mysterious etchings that I don't think it's ever been done before, but I think it would be very interesting to compare both, etchings in the Shady Wall and at Track Rock Gap to see if, they line up straight together. If I'm not mistaken, Gwen earlier told me about another example looked just like what had been written on the Shady Wall. Actually, even here out in Murphy, North Carolina, there is, their town's museum. And in that town, they have a carving of a two-twin statue from what they call from the time of the mysterious Moon-Eyed people. And again, it's one of those mysterious tribes of people that...
And they were different than that other group you're talking about.
Yep. I mean, there's just...
When did they rule?
I would probably say the mysterious Moon-Eyed people was about 5,000 years ago.
So they were after the...
Or before, probably.
Before.
Now,
yeah, 5,000.
Yep.
Now, I wonder what the descendant they were from. Any thoughts on that?
I do know the myth surrounding the Moon-Eyed people, but I forgot what that was exactly. That's one thing that I need to do more of my research on.
So they would have been a predecessor of the... What'd you call those?
Ani-kutani.
Ani-kutani. Now that guy that does those UFO ancient history guy, what's his name?
You're talking about, I know what you're talking about. It's like,
He talks about the Anunnaki. Is that different than what you're saying?
Yes, the Anunnaki are totally different. The Anunnaki were these group of people from, I think I don't think it was Sumatra. It was like more like during the times of gosh, I forgot. Anyway, it was a group of people that gosh, I wish I could remember, because the Ani-kutani were from that group. It was I think it was during the time, like I said, don't quote me on it. Like during the times of Babylonia, maybe even before then. But it's like some of the things that are said about the Ani-kutani is it was like this advanced race of people that lived thousands of years, and utterly fascinating, if you ask me.
Yeah, sounds like it. But this is not the same group that you're talking about. What? Tell me more about that group that ruled the Cherokee. Now, the Cherokee Indians would have been, what, just around here in East Tennessee, in North Carolina?
The Cherokee, they come into this area, gosh, because they came up from the northern areas, like where Michigan and Indiana, and anyway, they came down here and they pushed them out. About 300 years ago, before Europeans arrived into this area, that's what the Cherokee did. They burned their mounds and they pushed this people, the Ani-kutani, out of this area, or at least what is written in, like I said, I believe it was Charles Harris. Anyway, he was a Cherokee chief in 1826.
But they ruled over the Cherokee. And prior to that, the Moon-Eyed people ruled over the Cherokee, or did they rule over that group you're talking about?
That part I don't know. I mean, that I'd have to do my research a little more on that one.
But there's some thoughts that they could have been. Now, some of these ancient artifacts have of the pictures of people, the drawings and hieroglyphs, I guess you'd say. They have the native Indians were usually a round face, more of a square jaw or rounded jaw, and the others were more of a triangular face, like more of Egyptian type people that had long chins. So it's like they were meshing the cultures at one time.
Yep.
But when we talk about, me and you're, we've lived half a century. We're talking about 5,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. Who could guess what this looks like here? I mean, it could have been crawling with Egyptians, for all we know.
Yep.
And you say, well, why don't we find anything? I guess erosion and stuff covers it up.
Yep.
I wonder how much, like a year out in the woods, would cover up over something. You ever wondered that?
Actually, when I was out at Old Stone Fort State Park out in Middle Tennessee, I did see something like that. They had for metal cans and stuff or garbage, about this much would be from like the 1950s or topsoil. And then when you would go deeper, it would be something from around 100, 150 years ago, and then 200 to 500 and going down into the dirt.
So when you go back 3,000 years, it could have been extremely deep that we're not running into it.
Yep.
But when we do like regular construction excavation, some of this dirt we dig in, there's no way it's just packed. You can tell it's never been disturbed. So it would have to be in areas that are heavy in topsoil and loose dirt and dirt that lets water through and that sort of stuff. But now some like Mississippi, or wasn't Memphis or Mississippi partly underwater at one time?
Yep, it was.
So there could be stuff there that we have no clue about.
Yep.
And now along the Nile River in Egypt was a city they called Memphis. Is there any correlation with the Memphis here?
I don't think. I mean, that's one thing that I don't think that there is some kind of. I mean, it makes you wonder. I mean, I think it could be, because you have the pyramid that's built there out in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, it was a wrestling rink, but now it's a Bass Pro Shop.
But it wasn't. That's not an ancient artifact, right?
No.
How about the possible Egyptian tomb in or Egyptian temple, I guess, or the evidence of Egyptians in the Grand Canyon?
There is actually a lot of evidence on that one. There is a group what had happened is when it was researched, I think it was done by, was it the Smithsonian that did it?
Mr. Powell, maybe.
Yeah, but that may have been him. But anyway, it's like what...
He's the guy that found that was paid by the Smithsonian, I believe.
Yep, that's it. And anyway, when they looked into this area, it was a cave out in the Grand Canyon, and some of the things that they were finding were Egyptian artifacts, Egyptian hieroglyphs, tombs, and it's like this area of the Grand Canyon is just so extremely hard to get to that, even if I'm not mistaken, I think even the National Park Service, they've even said, you can't go down there. Like that area too, that's, and you can't drive not drive, you can't fly a plane in there either, or a helicopter, because that's all prohibited airspace, because it's federal land. So, it makes you wonder, are they hiding something, that could potentially rewrite history and, make us look at America in an entirely different way.
There's some people who say that this Mr. Powell was hired nefariously by the Smithsonian Institution. Now, why would they want to cover anything up like that?
I would probably say my reasoning for it is it would just completely change. Well, the only thing that I can think of is that it would cause total rewrite of history, and that's the only thing that I can think.
And what would be wrong with that? With finding out what the true history was? Can't history change?
Yep. You see it like in textbooks all the time. They're finding more and more stuff, that makes you go, oh, that wasn't what we thought before. It kind of makes me think about, because there is an example of this, because it's like they don't want you to know. It's like where's my thoughts today? That's the only thing that I can think of. It's like they just don't want you to know, and it's like, why?
What would be the point?
Yep. I guess maybe it kind of has to deal with maybe there is proof of aliens. I've read an article, I think it was featured on CNN about back in 2020. There was this mysterious, UFO, unidentified flying object, that flies right past this plane, and now the United States government has to start kind of talking about it,
You're referring to the Tic Tac, they call it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they haven't ever explained that, have they?
Nope. That was in 2020, and still, 2 years later, they're still going, no, if it were like aliens, I think what would happen is, I guess maybe it's similar, to why they don't want anyone to know about, the history of, the true history of America, or potentially true history of America. Maybe it's just that they don't want people to go crazy. Maybe they figure, some people will, cause some kind of hysteria, and it could lead to something that I really wouldn't even...
When did people start writing stuff down in books and writing history?
Gosh, that was... Recorded history, I think it only predates 5,000 years. I think it was only 5,000, 7,000 years. human history has not, or humans have not recorded history that long, in our lives, or not, or.
Other than writing on rocks and stuff like that, right?
Yep. I mean,
They couldn't write till they got paper or parchment or something.
Yep.
Isn't the Dead Sea Scrolls like the oldest thing they've found that was actual writings?
Yep.
What about the Rosetta Stone?
Oh, that's another interesting one. When Egypt was being dug up by the British Empire, Britain was going in, they were looking at it, some people were even eating mummies at the time. It was making them really sick though. What had happened is there was a group of British soldiers that were moving stones, and next thing they know, they find this big giant stone that falls over, and it's probably maybe about, the Rosetta Stone's about that big.
3 by 3 or something?
Yeah, 3 by 3. But what they find is they find ancient Egyptian that is written on it, but then they also find 2 languages that are also virtually the same. One of them was Roman, and then there was another one. But anyway, long story short, these inscriptions or writings on this stone were all identical. One was written in Roman, one was written in Egyptian, and then there was another language that it was written in. But through this stone, they were able to decipher what ancient, or what are written in the hieroglyphs, because up until that point, the hieroglyphics or hieroglyphs, in Egypt, they didn't know what they meant. To them, it was just a large wall of these very strange etchings.
So this Rosetta Stone had 3 languages on it.
Yep.
And they all said the same thing.
Yep.
And that allowed them to. Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem.
Yep.
What does the Rosetta Stone say?
Okay, anyway, the Rosetta Stone was written in 3 different languages, and it was discovered in 1799 by a group of British officers. It was a royal decree issued by, what was his name? It was the king of the time, and it was the king of the time versus the Ephesians. It was basically, I guess, compared to a present-day lawsuit, I guess you would call it. But through that, they were able to kind of, translate what's written here and what's here, and what also the other language was. So they were able, that's kind of like how they were able to decipher, what these hieroglyphs were. Because up until that point, they didn't know what it was.
So so that was like one of the very first
Rewrites.
or in other words, they had the written word prior to that, but this is, as far as the general public, because if you had a king or a leader writing, you might get a different spin on it, right?
Yep.
But as far as people being able to freely write whatever they wanted to, like a book,
Yep.
I wonder when that started coming about.
Actually, that one I do know some about that. You have like some of the early days of like 50 BC or 50 AD. I mean, you have the the Jewish community. I mean, the Jewish Israel. They have some of the longest recorded texts that go back in history. But like, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, or even in Jesus' time, if you look at it, the 4 Gospels, Mark, Luke, John, and Matthew, they were only written like only 20. Well, some sources say 60 years after Jesus resurrected, but they're also finding that they keep going back further, or they keep getting earlier and earlier and earlier. To who knows, when if they might find something, that the Gospels were written only 10 years after Jesus' death.
So they're thinking that the Gospels might have been written even earlier than 60 years after.
Yep. And actually, it was an article I had read back in 2014, but what had happened is they were looking at an Egyptian's sarcophagus, and what they were finding is they were finding parchment paper like sealed within the sarcophagus, kind of like reused paper, and what it was the Gospel of Mark, which is the earliest, the first gospel period. Mark was the very first. Early or the very first gospel.
So they found this in the sarcophagus?
Yep. Kind of like reused paper, like something recyclable.
Yeah.
I guess what would be in present day.
So this was found, this was known to be how much sooner after Jesus died or was resurrected?
I think it was about 50 years.
Because 50 years isn't that long in the big scheme of things.
Yep.
That was written pretty well afterwards.
Yep. I mean, huh? Oh.
And I guess they didn't have, I guess what somebody wrote down wasn't necessarily, known to be history until they started really like at the printing press, I guess.
Yep. Oh, the Gutenberg.
Now, some people, when the printing press came about, they said it was going to destroy history. Some people were really against the printing press being, I guess it was like the modern day computer or whatever.
Yep.
But when you think about, it's just been 2,200 years since Jesus was resurrected, right?
Yep.
And you figure if Columbus came to America in 1500s, it's only been
about maybe 1,500, 1,500 years after the resurrection of Christ.
And so we would have only been here 700 years.
Yeah.
And look what's happened.
Yep.
I mean, you think about if you could go forward 700 years. I don't know where you could, if you could even. Is there any way when Columbus was coming? Of course, he got attributed for discovering America, but he didn't because there were already people here.
Yep.
And you got to wonder how they got here.
Yep.
You say, well, it was from the Ice Age. All right, go back. They think that's when they came across, or some say that it was so close that they could come across in canoes and stuff.
Oh, like the Bering Strait.
But why would somebody do that? I mean, why would you just get in a boat and go that way? Because it's too far for just fishing.
Yep. I could answer some of that, but this is kind of coming more from, I would probably say religious freedom, even going back prior, even before Protestants were here. That's kind of what I think, where some of them came from. Like, for example, I'm trying to think. Well, you might have the Knights Templar. Some say people came here to America, but then you also have the allegedly, Japanese. Well, anyway, I guess really that would be one of the things.
Do you think the Japanese were here at one time?
I think so. I mean, if the Bering Strait, had really been there that long, and if Japan, was really as sophisticated as as it was or it's been recorded, I totally think it's possible.
How sophisticated were the Japanese?
They were very early Japan. I mean, they were some of the smartest people in history. You can look at their boats present day. I mean, these things were big.
What year was they? Were they?
I'm guessing. I'm guessing probably. I think I read one source where they said about 4,000 years is when they came to the West Coast, or what is now the West Coast. But
well, if we had a way of writing history that was you could duplicate, we'd know so much more than we know now. Do you think the city of Atlantis was real?
there are sources that say it's real, and if you look into it, I mean, I do believe Atlantis is real. Who wrote the account of Atlantis? Which Greek philosopher was that?
Plato.
Plato. I mean, Plato was a very, very smart man, and if you look at his stories, for the most part, he was accurate in what he was writing. I don't think, Atlantis was what I guess present day says, it was just some kind of allegory or, representation of political, of a political utopia. I think it legitimately existed.
But he drew maps on it, didn't he?
He did.
Why did he write about Plato? Why did he write about Atlantis, reckon?
My guess is it was just so significant. It was I guess maybe a technological, well, I wouldn't say or a cultural marvel. Maybe it was some type of political, realm that, people were getting along, it worked in harmony, and, the technology and technological sophistications of the time were, thousands of years ahead of what they were doing. For example, this was actually found, I think, back in the 1800s, but it was found after a storm, and what it is, it's what they call the Archaeometheria mechanism. I think it's called the what is it? The Archaeometheria. Anyway, what it was essentially a computer that had been found in a shipwreck that was submerged about 20 feet underwater that these men that had found. The Archaeometheria mechanism is, like I said, it was a computer, but it was a computer that was 3,000 years before its time.
Well, had electronics in it or what?
It had gears. It had these really fine-tuned gears. It looked exactly like something you would see inside of a modern clock. It's self-propelling. It's self.
So it would do self-calculations or something.
Exactly.
I guess that being that old and being under the water, they probably can't get all the rust off of it to actually see it real good.
Nope. I mean, it's there's pictures of it online, and I mean, it's actually. I'll show it right here.
What makes you interested in strange history?
What I like about strange history is it just leaves that question, what is out there, Because, if you actually look at it, I mean, history, is only recorded by the winners. Here's a photo of the that's how you say it. Ani-kutani mechanism. That's what it looks like.
But now, how do they know that? Can you see that, Gwen? And they suspect this was 2,000-year-old computer.
Yep, essentially, the equivalent of a 2,000-year-old computer.
Well, that is something, isn't it?
Exactly.
But if you figure somebody's sailing that far away on water, they got to have some technology.
Yep. Actually, speaking of...
but if you were Columbus coming over here on a boat and navigating through those,
waters, oceans, sails.
No, those things that you see how far you're going and navigate.
Sextet.
Yeah. if from him to do that, and 700 years later, or maybe 600 years later, we got GPS coordinates, and I can talk to you by Zoom, and I can x-ray your body and see what's in it. That is amazing in 700. Now, if you go back 700 years prior to him, that would be been the 700s.
Yep.
What would have been the technology then, or what would have been the what would life have been in 700?
700 AD. Gosh, I have to look at that one. I think that may have been the Bronze Age.
The Bronze Age, which would means what?
Basically, that's when everything like tools or swords or anything, it was made out of bronze.
But back in Jesus was stabbed with a spear.
Oh, that's right. 1 second. Let me see. 700. Let me look that one up. Gunpowder would be the time of gunpowder. I mean, gunpowder, that's, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think the Chinese were the ones who invented the gun. But, so yeah, probably around.
So 700 years. I wonder if there was ever a time when technology or sophistication, if you will, I wonder if there's an algorithm where you can say in this many years it advances this percentage. And if you knew that, then you'd know where we're going to be in 700 years. Which I don't know what else it can be except space exploration, living on Mars, which you have to, there's no oxygen, right? There's very little, not enough to live.
Yeah.
So what else can they come up with except for, artificial intelligence?
Well.
Or teleportation.
That might be another one. I mean, for example, they might be able to create a hologram, that looks like, that I'm talking, you being right here, but, it's just a hologram. I mean, or maybe.
I can see that coming, but that's not much different than a Zoom, right?
Pretty much.
And it wouldn't be me.
Yeah, it would just be you probably standing, or sitting
here.
Yeah, I mean.
But instead of just seeing you on a picture, I'm seeing a hologram. I can see that coming pretty easily. Yep. Do they have that now? Don't they have that for Michael Jackson concerts or something?
I have seen that before, and I've also seen like people creating holograms. But I mean, I'd probably say that won't be for another 50 years or so. It's really cool to see like how the holograms work. I mean, I know sometimes you can get it through, through those VR helmets. I saw something a few years back. It was like a crystal clear version of a humpback whale. That was a group of kids in a gym. This humpback whale just comes up out of the floor and just smashes, and there's nothing but water.
But that's wearing a helmet.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about just sitting here and having a hologram of somebody sitting here.
I'd probably say about 50 years from now at least. But but anyway, yeah, I'd say at least 50. I mean, 'cause there were, like I said, there are some things there that I have seen that just utterly incredible. Actually, this is another one that we might see in our lifetimes. But actually, they were able to do it. But a lightsaber, like Star Wars,
yeah.
like that.
But what would be the point of that?
The only thing that I can think of is for military uses.
Or cutting ham?
Yep, or about cutting ham. That's about it. But I mean, it's incredible, like how much power even to put out to get something that strong. I mean, it's practically a building this size to push, put out that much energy.
I saw did you see the movie, what was that movie? Shoot. And the lady on there, it was a science fiction movie, and she was cutting roast with a saber knife.
Yep. Oh gosh, I think I know what you're talking about. Was that a? So I think I remember seeing something like that in a television show one time in Futurama, but that's more of a comedy, future comedy. But gosh,
I can't think of the name of that.
me either.
Anyway, I'll think of it in a minute. But when you think about technology, all the way from possibly discovering a temple in Norris, Tennessee, an Egyptian temple, and you don't have any evidence of the people.
Oh, I mean, technically you had the bodies, but then they,
Well, couldn't they exhume the bodies and see, with all the technology we've got today, couldn't they recreate the facial features of these bodies? And what did they do with the bodies?
That's one thing that I don't know. I mean, maybe they could be like what a lot of artifacts are Native American, or not even Native America, a lot of remains are, it's sitting in a, museum warehouse somewhere. I mean, there are a lot of examples of that too. And I do know that actually they could even be reburied. Back in the 1970s, you had it was an Indian or Native American, Reclamation Act, where one of the things was, the remains of the Native Americans would be returned and reburied. You see examples of this at Sequoia Birthplace Museum, which is just up the road from here in Loudon, or, well, Bonor, and to be more technical. But there was about 126 remains that were buried in that mound. So who's to say with that act, that those remains that were found, at this site near the Norris Dam, that they were reburied.
And what makes the Cherokee Indian have such facial features different than Egyptians?
The Cherokee typically have more of a kind of more of a robust, kind of like
high cheekbones.
Yeah, high cheekbones.
Whereas the Egyptians had more of a long face, right?
Yep.
I wonder if the skull is different. Total, the skull or just the. Wonder what that means.
That would be one thing to look at too. Comparing the skulls if you can find it. I mean, that would definitely open up a doorway that could help us understand, what was America like? Is it what we say in history books, or is it something totally...
I mean, we only go back to what? Columbus?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't go back that far.
It couldn't even go back that far.
Yep.
Boy, there's a lot of unanswered questions in there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but it's like... There are... Oh, go ahead.
And how much before Jesus died, how old was... I don't want to say recorded history because it wasn't recorded, but I wonder what the oldest recording thing they have.
Gosh.
Because that's the only way you could... Is that the only way we can record history? Is through the written word? Or is it through carbon dating? And some question it, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, some question, carbon dating really even works. Like, for example, the Shroud of Turin, that is, an artifact, that is said to have covered Jesus' face, during his burial. One of the things that is said is carbon dating says that it's about 1,500 years off from when Jesus, was resurrected. But if you look at it, the other enigma that comes with this artifact is the only way you can get an imprint like that is if you manage to strike it with lightning 3 different times with that much light and that much power is the only way that you're going to do that. Present day, we still can't do that.
Because it was almost like an exposure, right? Like a film exposure.
Yeah. I mean,
and it can only be done with extreme bright light.
Yep. So, which would only make sense, Jesus' resurrection. But the carbon dating part of it, it's like, I mean, there's even proof that carbon dating doesn't work. For example, I think this is one that I've heard in high school. It's like somebody, it was in Ireland, I believe it was Ireland or Scotland, but they found the remnants of a sheep, and they took this sheep, they dated the skull, and it said 6,000 years. The sheep had only been buried in the ground for 50 years. So it's like,
But when you watch these shows and documentaries, they always refer to carbon dating.
my thing with that is, I don't really know. Maybe that's just the only thing that they have to go off of.
Seems like they would come up with something that can date stuff better than carbon dating. That's an area that's not been too well advanced, I guess, because that would answer a lot of questions.
Yep.
Because how did the Cherokee get here, and how were they here before the? Now, where did you read about the moon-faced people?
Oh, the moon-eyed people?
Moon-eyed people.
I first heard about it and read about it when, actually I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers, Jacob the Carpetbagger, and I watched one video about this one particular artifact that was in this museum because I thought about doing a story or a vlog on it myself. But it was this mysterious, actually, since we're looking at pictures, I'll pull up a photo of it. But anyway, it was, I think it was found out in Murphy. One second. Let me pull it up. Moon-eyed people. Ah, there we go. This is the artifact that they found. And like I said, I think it was found out near Murphy.
Look at this, Gwen. So this was found in Murphy, North Carolina?
It was somewhere in Murphy. I think it was Murphy, but I do know it was in
Murphy, North Carolina. Strange Carolinas.
Yep.
And so how old do they think this was?
About 2,000 years old.
Wonder where they found it there.
Might say it in the,
Now, why do they have the faces so flat?
Well, I guess, well, not I guess, but that was another common characteristic of the moon-eyed people. They had really flat faces. I mean, that's one of their descriptions.
Now, what about these? What do you know anything about the Neanderthals and the different species of humans?
Yep.
Are you familiar with that?
I am.
What are we?
Actually, there is a very interesting study that was done. I think it was National Geographic that did it. But they did kind of like a study, you know, like kind of like 23andMe, you know, knowing like. But anyway, it's like every human on Earth at some point has about 2% it's either 2% or 10% Neanderthal DNA. So some people theorize that us, meaning, you know, humans, maybe, you know, co-mingled between the Neanderthals.
Were the Neanderthals what we classify as humans? Did they think like we did?
Actually, there is history set or archaeology as they say Neanderthals were, is they had more muscle than humans. They had thicker skulls, they were more muscular, and from what I understood, they could handle the cold a little bit better.
But were they different than Japanese people or Europeans or Egyptians or Cherokee? Were they that much different that we got to call them a whole different species? That confuses me.
Actually, I think I do know a little bit on how to answer that one. You know, people say that, you know, humans originated in Africa. I think they call it, it's not the cradle of life, but
that was from Lucy, right?
Yeah, from Lucy. You know, people came and migrated up through, or the theory is said that people would, you know, migrated up through Africa and came into, you know, what is now Europe. And I think that's where they commingled with Neanderthals, I believe.
So the Neanderthals were here?
Yep.
Where did they come from?
Honestly, I think that they were more northern, like kind of like in what is now present-day Europe.
Where does God factor into all that?
Honestly, if you look at it, if you look at the Bible, it's the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden, in its description, it kind of, falls in with its description falls like right in, somewhere that you would see in Africa, or close to present-day Israel.
You mean the description of the Garden of Eden?
Yep. So I mean,
Garden of Eden.
Yep. So it would only make sense, that the Garden of Eden being in some part of North Africa, or maybe even potentially not far from where Israel is, that from there, that's kind of where it factors in.
So you think that God created Adam there?
Yep. I mean, and if you look at it too,
when do you think that was?
Gosh, I mean, that would have to be, if you look at, I guess, let's start at, I believe it was done, I forgot where it was done so many years ago, but it was like tracing the history of humankind using the Bible, which was about 6,000 years.
6,000 years ago?
Yep, or the history of the Bible says, this world, that we live in is 6,000 years old. Or if you look at it, what was said. But it, if you
that 6 could be 7 or 5, but somewhere around.
Yeah. And it's, where was I going with that?
So if they trace the Bible back, if you kind of do a timeline, it's about 6,000 BC or 4,000 BC?
6,000 BC. But it could go back even further.
So how did the Neanderthals come into play? Did they have a soul like we do?
That makes me wonder. I do know that there is some percentage of our DNA that it's not of this world. So it only makes, probably falls further into, God created man. Neanderthals, I don't know where it I'm not sure where it falls into, but I'm going to have to do my research on that one.
That's interesting, isn't it? How that would play out the timelines.
Oh.
Because if you could start there, you could decipher a lot of this.
Yep.
Now, what makes you ask you this before? What makes you so interested in? Because you're not necessarily versed on Egyptians or Egyptian temples, but rather the surface of all of these various things. Everything from a ghost train to Bigfoot to all of these. So you don't like necessarily go real deep into one subject, but more just a little bit deeper than the surface, right?
Yep. I usually, as you notice in some of my videos, it's usually, I'd probably say I normally go probably back about 200 years at most. Archaeological stuff I do, but it's something that I'm studying further to see where I could take it.
Hello, I'm Dee Burris, and most of you know me as a general contractor. In October of 2020, I started a podcast that I call The Discussion with Dee Burris. Each week, I have conversations with interesting, informative, and fascinating people from Cleveland and Bradley County and the surrounding areas. You can watch the discussion at dburris.com on YouTube and Facebook, where we would ask you to please subscribe, it's free, for updates and notifications of new shows. It's no problem. So back to the Anunnaki. Does that have any relation to the Bible talking about the men from Nephilim?
I don't think so. The Nephilim were a race of people that they were a race that had been conceived from angels that had fallen from heaven and women of the earth.
What did they look like?
These race of Nephilim. They were basically these big giant humans. They stood anywhere between I want to say like 15, 18 feet tall.
Golly.
I mean, biblically, you even have Goliath. Goliath, historically he stood, about 15, 16 feet tall.
You think he was a descendant of the Nephilims?
I believe there is biblical account.
Now, some biblical people think that's not real, that the men from Nephilim, that was a parody or
I think I know the word you're talking about. It is either an allegory or
allegory
or a anecdote.
Yeah.
There is proof of the Nephilim. This was in Wisconsin. Gosh, I believe it was back in the 1930s. They found about 16 different skeletons, and each one of these skeletons stood about 12 and 15 feet tall. I mean, these these remains were absolutely huge, about maybe the entire size of this table. You also even have, even some accounts of, granted, this is more of a Cherokee story, but the legend of Jucola. Well, Judicola. You got Judicola Rock out in, North Carolina. That's one account. He was a big, giant, slant-eyed giant who sat on the Devil's Courthouse, and he would watch for greedy hunters that were taking more deer than their share, and he would eat them. But I'm trying to think, because there are also examples of giants that have been found, but it's another one of those things that people don't want to, the mass population to know about. That'd be a proper word for it.
It's almost like people want to close their mind to anything that's not the norm.
Exactly.
Even if they heard it, they wouldn't believe it.
Yep. It's...
Now, these 16 giants, did they save them anywhere? Or the skeletons?
That's another thing that they don't know what happened to them. It was one of those things that I believe they got rid of. Like I said, it was one of those things that I knew the story at one time.
You ever get the feeling that there's people hiding more from us than we realize?
Oh, I believe it.
I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but you ever get to thinking that?
Yeah, I've thought about it before. It's it's I think, I know what I'm about to say is crazy, but there was one friend of mine, he was in the Navy, and he allegedly claimed that there's a population of dodos in South America.
Of what?
Dodos. The flightless birds, the ones that supposedly went extinct, but then again, you're kind of getting into some pretty deep stuff. But
why would they hide? You got to ask yourself, why would they hide the fact? And if we say who's they, I don't know who they are. But why would they? Maybe nobody knows. How would they know versus what I would know? Nothing's written down for them either. Maybe nobody's looked into it because nobody's looked into it.
Yeah.
What was the story about the dodo birds?
Well, as you know, the dodo, it was a flightless bird. It only existed on, I forgot what the island was. But when you had Europeans that came through here, the dodos, since they had no natural predator on this island, really all the people that were there, the settlers, all they had to go is just go up to the bird, bonk it in the head, and then, eat it. But the story with the dodo bird is my friend who is retired Navy. When he was deployed, one of the places that they were stationed out at was I forgot where in South America, but he said he saw one of the locals come out with a flightless bird that looked exactly like a dodo. But anyway, I digress on that one. But
maybe we don't. Maybe maybe we think somebody's in charge of all of this more than there is anybody really.
yeah.
And maybe the reason nobody knows is nobody's. And maybe you go to these people that have written these books and done documentaries on far outlandish things. Maybe they've studied it more than anybody. Maybe they are the authority on what it is.
Possibly.
Conspiracy theories, like the moon landing. You think there was a moon landing?
I do. There's proof of it. I believe it. I think it was in 2015 when this happened. But NASA was really annoyed, by all this, conspiracy theorist stuff, and they made it public knowledge, all the info, all the things that they had found on the moon, like all the sounds, everything that they had heard, it was all made public. But
what were the sounds, reckon?
I guess it was probably just like lunar, maybe, kind of like just stuff, like communications, between different, between the astronauts.
Okay, not necessarily wind or nothing, I guess.
Like something, that you would hear, like, oh no, my God, it's an alien. Nothing like that. Mm-hmm. But I remember reading something like that a while back.
Now, conspiracy theories is not really in your thing. It's more of just this odd things that's happened in around 200 years to now. It's kind of what you're...
Pretty much. I like looking at different things. But that's pretty much what I'd say. It's just...
What's one of the most... one of the vlogs that you've done that is there any that really kind of creeped you out that you really can't quite figure it out?
Let me think about that one. Let me think about all the videos I've done, because there is one that it just utterly to this day, it's no, I will not do that again.
Which one would you not do again?
Oh yes, actually I do. I have a perfect story on this. It was when I did my 1,000 subscriber special in New Orleans. I did go to what they call the Addie, or the Zach and Addie house. Currently it is a voodoo museum. But when I went in there, the moment that I entered that building, it was like the entire energy was just heavy. It hit you. There was something there that it just made you feel like you're just having to walk like this the whole time. But a little more information on this house. What had happened, it was during Hurricane Katrina. There was, two lovers. One was named Zach, the other Addie. And anyway, they decided, Addie, she didn't have the money to leave, evacuate New Orleans, so Zach decided to stay behind with her. Well, Hurricane Katrina comes through, wipes, a lot of New Orleans off, I won't say off the map, but this pretty much leaves Zach and Addie to themselves, along with the other people that decided to stay behind. Well, during this time, you had news crews that were coming in. You had CNN, Fox. And one of the people that they were covering was Zach and Addie. but in a way, this is considered their honeymoon. This is their relationship, how happy they were. But when things got resettled, people were coming back into New Orleans. New Orleans was being rebuilt. That's when things got harder. They had to start paying rent again. They started fighting more. And one night, one night they find a man who was laying out in the middle of the road. He jumped from a 5-story window to kill himself. That was Zach. And the police, they pull out a suicide note saying that, it was my fault. I had to pay for the life that I took by paying my own. And then he gave them the address to the house. When they go inside this house, they're met with a very heavy stench. There is a pot that is sitting on the stove. They open the stove, and that's where they find Addie's head. And then they also find the remains in the refrigerator and in the tub. I mean, this guy, he didn't eat her, but he cut her up. Some people say the reason why he did this is because they were fighting so bad, Addie did not want his name on the lease. And some people say that's what finally set him off. But again, with that house, prior to them living in the second floor, it was also a voodoo museum. Some people at least allegedly say that it was the quote-unquote spirits that drove them crazy.
So it was already supposed to be haunted.
Yep. And anyway, going into that room where that murder took place, it hit me like a brick. Like, the energy in there was heavy, and I really didn't want to go back. I mean, but...
it was that significant then?
Yeah. I mean, it was fascinating, to get, kind of get an introduction on voodoo, getting to hear what it, just hearing what it was, without having to, with it, being someone on the outside looking in, just being curious what it is exactly. But anyway, that house, it's got a lot.
Do you think that you got some more good vlogs coming up? You got a list of places you're going to go, or do you have a list of things that you're going to do?
Yep.
How long is the list of?
Right now, I do have 3 videos that are, all I got to do is edit them and put them together. That is Old Stone Fort State Park. Again, that is a very fascinating Indian Native American site that they say was used for ceremonial purposes. Then I also have one where I went out to the old abandoned Highway 64 bridge out next to the Ocoee Whitewater Center. And also, I filmed the Ocoee Whitewater Center as well, and what's left of it. I did that one, and then of course I went to Expedition Bigfoot, which, by the way, this is like one of the coolest museums I've ever been to.
I've been there. I really liked it. They got free coffee, don't they?
They do. But some of the things that they also, I mean, it's crazy. Like,
why do they always associate Bigfoot? I noticed when I was there, they associated Bigfoot with UFOs.
Actually, I read a book on this, and this is kind of interesting. Some Bigfoot researchers, they believe that Bigfoot has kind of like almost an infrared infrared kind of thing. It can dilate with its eyes. Some people say that when they've quote unquote seen Bigfoot, they've seen like these 2 big bright eyes, almost like a flashlight. Not how some people, light will refract into the retinas and the eyes, and there's kind of like, that gleam there that you can kind of see. No, I mean, people have said that they've seen these Bigfoot or big feet. I guess that'd be the plural. Their eyes look like these big bright eyes that, are just like out there. So I guess that's kind of why some people do associate with UFOs, because some researchers have seen that Bigfoot.
Well, they say that whenever you have Bigfoot sightings, they generally have UFO sightings in the area also, or calls in for that. But how would what is it, LJ? Not LJ.
Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge Mountains of Georgia.
It's actually the place between Blue Ridge and
Cherry Log.
Cherry Log, yeah.
Cherry Log, Georgia.
So, you would think if there was a Bigfoot there that we'd have seen him with all these camera phones, but then you say, well, camera phones don't work without cell coverage, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I guess you can video without a cell coverage.
You can. What are you talking about? Like shooting live feed?
Yeah, I mean, why don't? You'd think we'd start seeing more, but that at that Bigfoot expedition, it's obvious they believe there's a Bigfoot.
Yeah, I mean they even have a butt print of Bigfoot.
Yeah, they do.
I mean they've got a butt print. They've got they have sound recordings of Bigfoot. You know, that people who have I guess you could say people that have been trained by the military. Know how to kind of translate translate languages. They do pick up, like in all these sounds, they do pick up some kind of vocalization, some kind of language that each one of them is speaking to one another.
Wow.
I mean, even allegedly they have hair, so.
Wow, that's something. Is there any real wild theories that you've thought about that you're going to research?
Actually, there is. There is one that I do want to investigate, just because it sounds just so crazy, and people. It has occurred mostly in the Smokies, where people will just up and disappear out of nowhere. I think it's similar to spontaneous combustion. It's just where they're
just gone.
Yeah,
missing.
Yeah, there was one example, I believe it was in the 30s, that there was a disappearance of this child, and they could not find, he disappeared right in front of everyone, they don't know where he's at. That's one that I've wanted to do.
Isn't there a lot of disappearances like that?
Yeah, but they do call some of it the missing 411. Again, is another Bigfoot, has some Bigfoot theories.
Now, what's that, the missing 411?
Yeah, missing 411 is where people go out camping, or people will go out hunting or fishing, some kind of outdoor activity. And for example, you might be fishing in a creek, your tent is only 30 yards away or 50, but in that 50 yards, somebody says, oh, hey, I got to go back to the tent. In that 50 yards, they're gone. They don't know where they're at. They don't have any...
Haven't seen them again?
Yeah, and I mean, you have all these search crews that just will search for months and months and months until they call it a cold case. And 2 years later, they'll find the person's body on a mountain 20 miles away from where it was. It's crazy, I know.
But that's similar to... some people think those are that they could be going through portals.
Yep. That could be another possibility. I mean, there is... gosh, I'll have to do my research on it a little bit more. But there is... there are theories on that as well, with portals. People just randomly up and disappearing. And
like the one guy that was found in New York, and he had a identification on him that was from a place they had never heard before.
Yep.
I forget the story about that, but it's almost well documented.
Yep.
Do you think there's a lot of strange things that we don't have a clue about?
I do. If you look at it, I mean, for example, well, this is actually the biggest one. I think it's only about 30% of our oceans, or the percentage is probably even lower, are actually what we know what are in our oceans. That's one example. You have some of these forests, like the rainforests out in Brazil, in South America, that only maybe 20, there's only such a high percentage that have never even, people have never even set foot on.
Because it's just so hard to get to, or what?
It's just so remote, it's just so remote.
There could be civilizations there, right? Or tribes?
Yep. Actually, I found this out in 2014. They, I think it was called, I think it was the Monkey People, or something like that. Anyway, it was an old. I think it was found out in. I know it was somewhere in South America, but it was a. It was a. Anyway, it was basically this big giant civilization. It was out in the middle of the rainforest, and it's like no one. Like, I mean, it looks like people hadn't been in the area for like thousands of years. Like, it was all overgrown.
So they had the people. There's no more people left there.
Yep.
And there would be back to the written history. We would have not known about it. Even the Cherokee that were here during the Trail of Tears, they had theoretically been here for 2,000 years.
Yep.
So they didn't know their history.
I mean, the Cherokee, they have their stories on how, the earth, or I guess how creation was met. I mean, I'm not too familiar on it, but I do know that it's one of my favorite stories that I hear about when I listen to, Cherokee folklore or Cherokee stories. It was like the creation of the Great Smoky Mountains National, or the creation of the Smokies, which it was believed to be a giant bird. And when the bird was about to land, he swooped his wings, and he had so much force that it ripped the ground up, and that's what created the Smoky Mountains.
And that's what the Cherokee had told the parents told their kids or something, I guess.
Yeah.
But they couldn't have known where they came from 2,000 years ago. We can't even remember what happened last week, especially, and they didn't even have it written down, so they didn't know. Yep. We can't even rely on what they were thinking.
Yep. I mean, you think about it. I mean, the Cherokee language, it did not have, it wasn't written up until Sequoyah, created the syllabary back in 18.
Why didn't he just go with our language?
Actually, I do know that.
He had the long pipe. He's always pictured with a long pipe.
Yep. Sequoyah, the reason why he created the Cherokee syllabary was because he wanted a language for his people. Just because some lore says when he was a silversmith, he sat around some Cherokee men like at his smithing site, and he kind of talked to him like, why can't we have our own language? Because during that time you had people that were writing in French, or people that were writing in English or German. His reasoning was, why don't we create it?
When did he create that? About what year?
I think it was the 1820s is when he began his journey to creating this language.
And how long did they use it? When we came, the 1820s, the Trail of Tears started what, 1838 or something?
1836, I believe.
Wouldn't that be something, after you did all that trouble to come up with a language?
Yep.
They move them out.
Yep. I mean...
now, at one time, you had to have a visa to come across the Calhoun Bridge, right?
Yep.
Because this was Cherokee territory.
Yep.
And they had no knowledge of their history other than just stories from their parents.
Yep.
And that couldn't have been accurate, right?
Well, yeah. Especially like, I think, you start losing, history, a story starts losing it, or I forgot like how many years it takes to pass before a story eventually changes enough, that, it no longer represents, or if it's vocal, kind of like talk.
Yeah, because they wouldn't. There's no way we'll find out the true history before things were written down, and that was written by the victor,
yep,
or whoever wanted to put their own spin on it, or
yep,
their own biases. So we have no. Do you think the Bible was written like that, with some twists and turns, or you think it was truly inspired by God?
I believe it was truly inspired by God. For example, I mean, Hebrew is a language that has not like it has like in the thousands of years that it's been around, it has not changed.
If you want residential or commercial plumbing, give Rick's Plumbing a call. Call Jason or Josh. They'll do you a good job. I use them. I've used them for years. They're no problem.
Come on, woo!
So they wrote the Bible in Hebrew.
The Old Testament was, or the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and like the Gospels and the letters from Paul and eventually Revelation, that was written in Greek. But again, I mean, that was written in, well, what I believe to be in the lifetime, not long after Christ had died.
But he spoke Aramaic, right? Didn't he?
I think it was,
Yeah, he spoke Aramaic, but Mark, the earliest gospel, right?
Yep.
He wrote it in Hebrew.
Yep.
I guess speaking a different language is different than writing it down. Like I've got some people from Mexico that work with me, and I can't write their words, but we can communicate just a little bit. That may have been how it was done.
Probably.
But there's no way we can find out the true history. They get a little piece of arrowhead and they make up a story about it.
Yep. Shucks, what was it?
You say you believe the Bible was inspired, but you still think that there's some evil spirits. And I noticed you've done some vlogs on
ghosts?
Spirits and ghosts.
I do believe, like, that's been something, there has, that's one of those things that I wonder, do some of us really stay behind, for some reason? But then you've also got these entities, whatever they are, their sole intent is to inflict pain on a person. That's I honestly wonder, I do believe in demons, and I do, but anyway.
So you think there could be a demon in a house?
Yeah. Especially if you have somebody who's been playing around with a Ouija board. And actually, there are a lot of examples. Actually, this is perfect for what I've been working on here recently. I've been working on a possibly doing like something that would only have to, or could probably only operate seasonally. But what if I could create a ghost tour surrounding nothing but Bradley County's ghost stories? And in my research, I've written a book on it. It's about 55 pages so far. Some of the things that I do talk about, some of the experiences that I've had, the tunnels. Then you've also got Stamper's Furniture. I didn't know that one, but
I hadn't heard about that one.
Oh, it's very, very interesting because in the 1920s, well, I'd probably say maybe even going back further, Stamper's was only in that corner of the building that it inhabits entirely now. You had Stamper's, then you had J.C. Penney's, and then you had a series of doctors' offices on the second floor. But there are a lot of reports from the Posey family who own Posey Gun and Pawn. I'm hopefully going to be able to interview them sometime. Back when they did overnight cleaning on the second floor of that building, some of them it is said that some of them have said that they've seen a woman in white with short hair. She'll take one look at them and she'll disappear. Some people have said that they've seen a little girl that mostly plays in the what they call the beach room. I believe it's the beach room. But anyway, they'll be watching her play, and she'll walk right into the wall and disappear. My theory with that is in Cleveland's early days, surely because, there weren't that many hospitals around, I'm kind of wondering if an accident may have occurred, and the reason why something like that could be on the second floor is just, a tragedy, or for whatever reason that they're still there. Then another one, because there is one, oh yeah, and of course, with the stories of Fort Hill Cemetery, with it being Fort McPherson and Fort Sedgwood, I do believe there is some things that have happened, mostly residual stuff, especially, somebody hearing cannon fire, when there hasn't been a cannon on that hill in over 100 years. Mm-hmm. Or people, looking in one direction and seeing a group of Union soldiers walking in single file line and just disappearing right when they turn their head back. And then, of course, you got, of course, the Monk of Charleston. That's probably one of the darkest stories, I guess you could say.
People have actually seen that train.
Yep. Oh, so you've talked, or
I have, yeah.
I mean, it's so weird. I mean, but again, that's another fascinating story. What are some others that I heard? I have heard that there is something in the old Cherokee Hotel. I have heard that. Also, there are two, actually surprisingly, there are two cryptids in the Bradley County Bradley County / Cleveland area. A cryptid is something like Bigfoot or Mothman, but those two are what they call the Wampus Cat. Wampus Cat is said to be like a six-legged, something similar to a cougar, has 6 legs. Its scream sounds like a dying woman. There's...
Around this area?
Yep. It's very... Because the Wampus Cat, allegedly, it has both origin both by European settlers and the Cherokee of the area. The Cherokee, what they say a Wampus Cat is, it was a woman who thought that her husband was having an affair. He would always go hunting, and she would never see him. But one day, she decides to cover herself with the cougar's pelt, and she watches him. Anyway, she gets caught, and as a result, he curses her, and she becomes, half woman, half tiger. Europeans believe it was a witch who could transition between a woman to a cougar, or vice versa. Anyway, some people say that she was caught in the act of transforming, and that's why she was forever stuck between half woman and half cougar.
That'd explain the 6 legs, I guess, wouldn't it?
Yep. And then you also have the actually, this is another Cherokee, primarily from this area. It's called the Raven Mocker. And the Raven Mocker is said to be this, it is a shapeshifter. What it does is it preys on its victims, and it feeds off its spirit. And eventually it will make the person so sick that when it's alone with its victim, it will eat the heart of the person, along with its soul. But that's why some people say, the most common sight of a raven mocker is something that has, shapeshifted into its previous victim. But stories go that if you see a raven mocker in its true form, it will die instantly. How Cherokees have spoken about what a raven mocker is, it is a hag. It looks very bone-like, skeletal. She has these long fingernails, these long claws. Often wears something what looks to be a giant crow skull across her face. And now, according to some of the Cherokee beliefs, is the only way a raven mocker can be like sensed is either by the victim or a Cherokee medicine man. And what the medicine man would do if they suspected somebody was being inflicted with a raven mocker is they would set up four different stakes, and they would burn ceremonial tobacco. And well, what they said or would say is if like something were to jump or they would see something, within the smoke, that would be the raven mocker. And the Cherokee medicine man would pray, and I forgot what else he would do, but that would ultimately kill the creature.
You primarily bring up these stories and sort of hit the highlights, but don't necessarily dig into them like study them for years. You study enough to pique the interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm creating like a video, sometimes I do it just because, I find it so interesting. But there are some things that, I'll study, it's just like it just absolutely fascinates me. One of those being, it's not necessarily anything supernatural or paranormal, but it's the Wickham Statues near Palmyra. Anyway, it's just outside of Clarksville. But what it was
Not Palmer.
No, not Palmer. Palmyra. It's like Palmyra. But what it was is he was just an average farmer. After he had retired, he and his wife moved into a smaller cottage, and what he would do is he would create these big giant statues. These big giant. Some of them would be of the Virgin Mary because he was Catholic. Some of them was of Kennedy or a bull. He had like all these interesting statues, and at one time there were about 40 of them. But when he died, well, because of his political affiliation, he was Democrat. Most of the people in that area were conservative and Republican. Well, that made them a little more inclined to destroy the statues. But if you go out in Palmyra to this day, you can still see these big, giant Actually, you know what?
What are they made of?
Concrete and mesh. You know what? We'll bring one up for the...
What fascinates you about that?
I just find it like you have like... And that's another thing that I like, folk art. You have like all these people, like of the Appalachian Mountains, it's like they create like these incredible works of art, but yet, it's like, it's just so cool. And so, one second, Wickham
It's nothing the Smithsonian would be selling then, or not Smithsonian, Sotheby's.
Yeah. It wouldn't be anything that they would be. Again, that's another thing. It's like I like the stuff that people aren't interested in because, for whatever reason, they like listening to the same stuff over and over again. Here we go. There we go. Here's an example of one of the statues. There we go. That's
something, isn't it?
Yep, that's the Paul Bunyan statue.
The Paul Bunyan. Is that Paul Bunyan on the horse backwards? Or what is he on? A bull?
Bull.
So, boy, that is really something, isn't it?
Like I said, that was all done by one man, and I find that utterly fascinating. Another one...
I've never heard of that.
Well, check it out. It's like, this guy is so... anyway,
and that's a big piece of stone. Is that stone underneath it or concrete usually?
I think it's concrete, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like it's just formed concrete. And that's in Tennessee.
Yep.
No, I've never heard of that.
And actually, I've also found a group of abandoned trains that actually, again, it has another interesting story behind it. I won't say where in Tennessee it is, just because they're really trying to keep. Its.
Why do they want to keep abandoned trains?
Well, why they want to keep them hidden is to keep them from being destroyed, or not destroyed, but like or being vandalized. Here, let me pull up a picture of it. But what had happened in this part of Tennessee, it was a part of coal country, and the man who owned it pretty much owned the city. And in the 1930s, when FDR was going up for re-election, he was going to establish something which is known today as minimum wage. And during the time, the coal mining companies, you had to use their money. You couldn't have regular money.
Yeah.
Anyway, these trains were what they called dinky line locomotives. What they would do is they'd bring in products from down from the mountain, they'd bring it from the base of the mountain up to the towns. And when FDR got reelected, this man who owned the town, he said, "I will shut the town down." And what he does is he puts these locomotives in a barn, and they've been there for over 100 years.
Is that right?
And let me pull out.
And where is this at?
Like I said, it's I'd probably say best way to describe it is it's in East Tennessee.
Is that right?
A second, let me pull up a good picture of it.
I've never heard of that.
I mean, it's actually how I found about.
You have a nose for this stuff.
Yep. I mean, I'd like to hear, like I said, I love to hear about the stuff that's like much, people aren't familiar with, but it's so cool that it needs to be talked about. Let me pull up one photo. Here we go. Found it. Come on. Let me find a way to just blow this picture up.
Where are you working now?
Right now, I'm actually working at M&M Mars.
Is that right?
Yep. Now that's another interesting thing to see how they do everything.
Are you eating more and more M&Ms?
No. Well, actually, no. Let me pull up. They say it's looked down upon, but I will respect and not get in trouble. But anyway, it's a fun job. I mean, it's so interesting to see how, this is how they make candy. Here we go. But anyway, there we go. I think this will work. 1 second. Come on. There we go. That's one of the trains.
So this train is hidden from the
General public.
From the general public in East Tennessee. Looks like it's just in a regular barn or a shed.
I mean, that's the weird. Like I said, I'm not gonna. What the plan is, this is what I've heard so far, is that they are going to try to. At first, the town that they are in right now, there was word that they were going to pull it out of one of them out of the barns and put it on display. If you watch my video on that, you'll see they have a set of railroad tracks that are sitting out in the middle of town, but there's no train sitting on it. But I think what happened is the city found out how much it would cost to repair one of those trains, which was like $100,000. But I think it'd be maybe if we can get Alan Jones involved, maybe we can get him to buy one of them, and maybe it'll scare off all the homeless people in downtown.
Yeah.
Actually, that's another interesting story. When I did the test to see if it's even possible to do a ghost story or ghost tour in Cleveland, maybe spice up the nightlife. At least during the Halloween season, maybe from September to 1st of November. I remember when I was, I went to kind of where that memorial is, right behind the fire department there. Because, right there, you've got the train depot, which is now the Sethra bus station. You've got, the Joyce Rott House, and then you've also got, or at least an annex of where one of the potential, tunnels are.
Yeah.
Anyway, I took test audience to that spot to see how it would work. Everything was going well for the first 20 minutes. But then we had a homeless person show up that was, I think they must have been high on amphetamines or something.
Yeah.
but they were just out of it, and they followed me for like a whole 30 minutes
Golly.
with the test group that I was with.
It's disturbing, isn't it?
Yep, and probably the in at Johnston Park, like late in the evening, like I mean, it was just like The Walking Dead. They were like everywhere, like mindless. Like I don't want to sound mean, but it's like okay, I guess I got to turn around because at Johnston Park, that's at the foot of, if you look straight in this direction, you can see Fort Hill Cemetery. That's usually where I wanted to talk about, the Raven Mocker and the Wampus Cat, and the stories of, what became of Fort Hill Cemetery. But anyway, right outside of the courthouse, my mom sits down and she's like, "That's a razor blade." My mom almost sat on a razor blade outside of the courthouse. So anyway,
What if you get a disease from that, or would whatever disease on it would already been gone away?
all I know is my mom walked away from, honestly, I'd probably say there'd have to be something on it. Or at least some kind of drug or something like that. But I noticed it's like the more you moved it, more into the center of town, there's less homeless people because, you have, more, you have Lee University, but then you've also got some of these other
Police presence.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're gonna? Do you do like a vlog once a week or what?
Once every 4 days. I've kept that up for about the last 2 years.
Do you have any more evidence of Egyptian temples or anything in East Tennessee or anything that you've heard about?
Well, there is one that I do want to eventually check out, and that is Track Rock Gap that's in North Georgia. And apparently they do have a temple I won't say a temple, but when I say temple, there's like these stacks of rocks, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's considered a holy site by the Cherokee. But some people, that's another theory that some people believe is that the Aztecs or the Mayans, they came up from the Gulf of Mexico, and came up through Florida, and that's another theory that's been around.
Now they think the Aztec got wiped out by plague, right?
By a plague in Spanish. What do you call it? Spanish
Conquistadors.
Conquistadors.
Chet, let me ask you this: you've mentioned moving to Hollywood.
I want to just because. Well, before all this ever started, my degree at the University of Tennessee, I graduated with a BS in journalism and electronic media with a focus in video production. Hollywood even though I've heard the market there is extremely hard to get into, I've got friends out there that are, in that industry, working, and furthering their careers there. Since I already have some good friends out there, see if I can't make it. But then again, I have heard that Atlanta's still a beast,
But you're doing pretty good now.
Yep.
Now, what are you? People can find you on what? The Dream Poet. How do you find your vlogs and how do you find them?
Well, what you want to do is, of course, get on YouTube, go into the search bar, and type in Dream Poet. And
one word or two?
2 words. And Dream Poet, it will come out as you'll want to look for the or what I call my logo. It's an anchor, similar, of course, it resembles, a sailor's cross, and, then you've, of course, got, an oarfish going, like, right here, which is, like, mystery, represents mystery, and, of course, the whale, which represents knowledge and wisdom and what have you, or what is recorded, I guess you could say. But that's what you would want to look for. Or on Instagram, it's Chet Guthrie 4 that you can find me at, or Dream Poet Media LLC on Facebook. But that's just where you can find me at.
Well, wish you luck, man. Enjoyed having you.
Thank you, Dee.